Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. Welcome, Maria, from the other side of the world in Australia. And to kick off, please share with people who you are and tell us about your great work.
Wow, thank you so much, Alan. It's just been a pleasure to have met you a few weeks ago through the Values group, and I feel so honored that we have connected. So my name is Maria Semple. I am originally from Venezuela. I've been in Australia for nearly 4 decades, and people still wondering how come I have my Latin accent. And so I became a coach 17, 18 years ago this year, and I have been working lately with women, particularly in organizations, and helping them bridge the gap between their capabilities and authority, how they feel they have the right to exercise authority. And so we delivered a program that is based in emotional intelligence, and it's been a very a strong passion of mine to help these women from their initial problems that they bring to help them flourish and address complex systems in these large data-driven organizations.
Great, thank you. And if somebody was listening or watching this now thinking, oh, that sounds interesting, I'd like to know more, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Look, the best way is to connect with me over LinkedIn. I do have a website. It's always work in progress. When you are a founder, it's always things changing. So I wouldn't really send you to the website at the moment, but you can get in touch with me over LinkedIn, where I constantly put material and discuss the topics that I cover, and yeah, it will be great to connect there.
Brilliant. And before we started to record, we discovered something that I'd just like to celebrate now. So let's raise our cups of hot water and say cheers, because I think this is the first Values Jam with two people drinking hot water.
Yes, because it's early morning for you and is evening for me, so it's wonderful.
So here's the Values Jam card deck, and the first job is for you to guide me to choose a card that we're going to use for our Values Jam. So I'm just going to shuffle them. And how many piles would you like me to make in front of me?
I would like 5 piles,
5 piles, okay. And they're
possible, please.
different sizes, and 4 and 5. So now I've got pile one on my left and pile five on my right. So which number pile shall I choose?
I would like pile 3, the one in the middle.
The one in the middle, okay. And we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15 cards. So a number between 1 and 15.
I would like number 10, please.
Number 10. So I'm going to go from the back 14, 13, 12, 11. This is so you've chosen enjoyment, Maria. And this, I was talking to somebody about this the other day because I've been doing these values jams now for years, right? And I was thinking about the chance of cards being chosen. You know, it should be even, right? Over a period of time, the the cards should be chosen evenly because they're totally at random. And yet, it seems that some cards get chosen more often than others, and enjoyment is one of these. And what's strange is that enjoyment is one of my core values, and it's like I don't know whether there can be anything in that. Surely not from a science point of view, but it just seems very strange that some cards are chosen more frequently at random than others. What's your take on that?
Well, I would say that in my experience, perception is projection, right? So it's perhaps that even unconsciously or subconsciously, the car gets picked up, not only because might be one of your core values, but it's something reflects to the other side, the person in front of you, wherever their location is. It might be something that it needs to be highlighted um, for that person's needs, or in other words, what I have found in my work is that anything is not a coincidence. It reflects a mirror and a map. And so that is my take.
Okay, well, thank you. And it's I used to really kind of beat myself up because I used to want to know the reason for this sort of thing. But now I just enjoy it. It's just like it's beautiful, and so just take it and see what happens. So the first question is this: what does enjoyment mean? And there's a follow-up, which is more imaginative. And what does it look, feel, and sound like?
Well, enjoyment, and it's something that what it means to me is something that we tend to lose somehow along the way from childhood into teenage and adulthood. Particularly if what I was discussing yesterday with a friend, it was this that she needed rest because she has an autoimmune problem, but part of her said that she was lazy. And when you think about ancient cultures, for example, in South America, we have the Indians that had populated in the Amazon and they went to live there. And in Australia, we have Aboriginal women. It seems that these people know and understand the DNA and the core word of enjoyment. It seems like they have gatherings to celebrate, to sit down in the heat of the day and just enjoy life and celebrate each other. So the enjoyment, although is something that we tend to lose along as we are growing up and that we exercise and practice naturally when we are children, there is a time in our lives when we start reconnecting with it, whether you choose it as a core value as you have, or whether we are forced by health issues or other circumstances in life.
Do you know
So
this?
what,
This is
yeah,
this is a fascinating line of exploration that you've raised, which I don't think I've heard before. But it strikes me that it's this difference between enjoyment, which is very natural, like you described with the ladies getting together and just enjoying life, making time for that. And then what occurred to me is that in modern society, we kind of fabricate enjoyment. So whether that's going out for a meal or a show or stuff like this, it's kind of on the schedule and it's planned, and it's not particularly natural actually much of the time. So I'm curious to understand your thoughts about that difference between enjoyment naturally and enjoyment that we create.
I would say, Alan, that so enjoyment naturally will feel to me, again, I will refer back to childhood. And so we have this natural disposition to enjoy and play with mud or sand or collect stones or whatever with no imposition and no expectations. However, what it feels more rehearsed or imposed by society is that even some cultures might have a status, a level. that is considered by their level of enjoyment. In other words, when you retire, when you become a retiree, then you're supposed to have a more level of enjoyment. And also you are reaping the fruit of your working life, which is 45 to 50 years. And as you might see for our gray hair, so we might belong to certain demographics like baby boomers or so on. And so I think it it is something that it's more rehearsed and associated with status. But when we revert to childhood or childlike, which I have made a commitment to be lately, in the last few years, I just don't need any external stimulant. But for example, while I was traveling to come here, I made a purpose to go out before I went to sleep and see the starry sky. And then in the morning, I put my alarm between 5 to 5:30 because I'm not an early person, but I wanted to go and see the sunrise, the first light.
Yeah.
And, and I actually film it on my phone. And the level of energy that I was there in awe, it was just amazing. And so it was very childlike. I was enjoying that to the fullest. So that's possibly what I can say.
Yeah, and you've made me think of two experiences that I relate to what you said absolutely. So recently, I took my stepfather and youngest daughter to Norway, and the reason why was because he wanted to see the Northern Lights, and he had been once before to Norway with my mother when she was alive, and they didn't see them. And they always promised each other that they would go back, but unfortunately, she died, so they couldn't do that. So I took him, and we went to a place called Tromsø in the north of Norway, and we went on a trip, out into the wilderness, I suppose. And then we waited. And at first, it wasn't very spectacular at all. But then maybe an hour passed, and all of a sudden, the clouds must have cleared, and there was a lot of energy in the sky. And there was the most amazing light show for maybe a couple of hours. And that was that was enjoyment. I remember saying to my stepfather, if there is such a thing as heaven, this is probably what it looks like because it was wild. It was just brilliant. And then actually, it's another nighttime thing. Well, early morning you mentioned. So I was with my partner on holiday on Mallorca, and so we became aware of one point where you could see the sunrise. And so, like you, we got up, I think it was around about 4:30 in the morning to be able to drive to this place. And it was a bit tricky because the roads were winding and no light and all of this sort of thing. But when we got there, and I remember this goat and baby goat just walked by about 5 meters away as the sun was coming up. And it was just this fantastic experience, and worth more than all of the theaters and shows and everything that you could pay a lot of money for and cost nothing. So I'm with you.
Yeah, sure. I think enjoyment, as my friend was saying, that she felt lazy, and then I reminded her of the women from Indian tribes in our South American continent, and the ones that live in the Amazon, and there's still many tribes alive. they just have to enjoy and sit down in a hammock or somewhere because it's too hot or humid, and they just lays there and find. And something I have learned throughout the last 3 years, particularly, is to have that simple enjoyment
Yeah,
and rest and just be there.
yeah. So, and the I guess that sounds like an antidote to filling up your schedule and being as efficient as possible and being as productive as possible. And it's not necessary, right, to spend all of your time doing that. Sometimes it can just be nothing, and that's fine.
And that's exactly right. And in my program, in the program that I delivered, and I mentioned something to the women that having their calendar full of meetings, it doesn't actually mean they are productive. It means that they don't have time to sit down and rest or absorb or look at the landscape on
Yeah,
what is important and not what is urgent urgent right now, but what will be important, and to have priorities. So teaching them to have certain enjoyment and certain space in between is something that I have taken as a commitment to in my program.
mm. That was a lesson for me just this year, actually, because late last year I received a notification that I would be needed to serve jury service. I don't know how it works where you are, but here, you have to do it, but you don't have to do it the first time of asking. But anyway, this request was for the beginning of January, and so like you, I have a consulting business, and the beginning of January is usually not the busiest time, and so I thought to get it done at the beginning of January would be a good idea rather than maybe being asked to do it later in the year. So I agreed to do it. But then what I hadn't realized was that it was going to turn into a 4 week commitment because of the nature of the case. And so it meant that I couldn't, normally I fill up my calendar for January, to get a fast start to the year. And this year I couldn't because of the jury service. And I thoroughly enjoyed it because we weren't always required at the court each day. And so it meant, just exactly like you say, that I had space, I had time to consider things. And so I've made a decision that next year I'm going to block out January and only put in the really important things, not fill it up, because I really enjoyed the start to the year being like this and different. So it sounds like we're aligned on that as well. I'm now gonna follow up with this more imaginative side of the first question. So have a think about, when you think of the word enjoyment, what images come to mind, what sounds come to mind, and what feelings come to mind?
Let me close my eyes for a minute. And I, the feeling that comes to mind is spontaneity, totally spontaneous.
Mhm.
And I will give you an example that I'm a little bit uncoordinated, even though I am a Latin woman that is supposed to dance salsa very well. So I find so much enjoyment and I feel it when part of me is listening to the music and dancing. And it's a cliche, I know, as if nobody's watching. And I think of Hugh Grant in that movie, the Four Weddings and a Funeral, I think it is, or no, is Love Actually, when
Love
he's,
Actually, right?
all, and I just feel like that's it. It doesn't matter. And so my first feeling will be spontaneity,
Yeah,
and that comes with a childlike, and it looks I don't know what it will look like, but maybe like a child covering mud, or with, your face, or when you're licking your mom's bitter when they're making meringues. It will look like possibly like that. It will. I have no other words, but I think that's what it comes to mind right now.
Okay. And on that, the on your image, I can see. So I've got three young grandchildren, and one of my favorite images of them is when they've got chocolate all around their mouth, but they don't know that it's there. And you can say, so did you enjoy that cookie or whatever it is? And they're, yeah, it was really nice. And then they've got this stuff that's giving the game away completely. And I've had, because enjoyment has come up quite a lot of recently as a card. The sound that is fresh in my mind is, I don't know if when you walk past a school where young children are on their playtime, and you can just hear that laughter and screaming, and the noise of children playing, for me is a really strong
Mhm.
feeling around enjoyment. So what about, let's now that we've got into this topic, let's go to the other side of the coin, and I'm curious about a time where you have noticed a lack of enjoyment.
When I used to work for the Victorian government, when I used to be an employee or a contractor, there was no, uh, I wouldn't say a total lack of enjoyment, because I made good relationships and friendships there, but the feeling of leaving at this time, daylight saving, we have 1 hour more, so it's very dark until about 7 o'clock in the morning. And this morning I heard the neighbors leaving, and it was dark. And so the feeling or the thought of having to get up so early, and it's dark, leave your house, it's dark, come home and it's dark, is the totally opposite of enjoyment. Is something that, after Melbourne lockdown in 2021, 2022,
Hmm.
they wanted us to go back to work 3 times a week. And I thought, I can't do it anymore. And that was my opportunity to break away from being an employee, and finally decide to go solo and establish my own consulting business, that I've been establishing for many years, but I did only part-time because I was working for somebody else. And
Yeah.
so I think, yes, and that's possibly what it means. Totally, the absence of enjoyment will be that sense of duty, obligation, because you have to pay the bills, because there's all these impositions.
Mm. And for me, it's a corporate workplace environment. Um, and I remember working for one organization, and my background first off was commercial hospitality management. So I ended up running five-star hotels and conference centers. And then I moved into workplace management. So it's basically when you go to a big office, all of the services that are provided, like reception and security and catering, audiovisual, all of that stuff. But anyway, it was for an investment bank. And because I come from a customer experience background and wanting to do things that people really enjoy, I remember a colleague of mine coming up with an idea during the summer that we would serve ice cream on the trading floor in this investment bank. And it was unbelievable the pushback that we got, because people would say, this is a serious organization, this kind of line. And anyway, we agreed that we would trial it, and everybody thought it was a brilliant idea. And
Lovely.
and it's obvious because people are working really hard. It's warm outside. Okay, it was air conditioned inside, but the thought of an ice cream on a hot day, it's just a great thing that people wanted. And yet, the senior people in the organization were trying to stifle this, because it wasn't serious enough. And
Mm,
I find maybe, I don't know whether this is fair or not, actually, but because of my experience, I've tended to work in male dominated corporate environments where the vibe seems to be prove that you're professional, and
mm.
nothing else will do. Um, and that's just not very human or very normal, actually.
No, no, it's actually, and it's so funny whether it's investment banking or large corporate organizations or government, they all are ruled by this structure where we do here what we always done. And so when you are bringing something new, they go and consider, well, what is the risk? How are we going to be seen, et cetera, et cetera. So it becomes very analytical.
Yeah,
Whilst, in a health organization, it might sound a little bit, oh, okay, it's not a worry, or depending on the field or the industry, it might just look uh, more acceptable. And the part that you're mentioning about male-dominated industries, yes, aren't we tired of this? We really are. We have to change these. We got to break these structures.
yeah, I agree. And actually, you've just reminded me recently, a colleague, Lisa Nunn, posted on LinkedIn about how we arrive at burnout in an unseen, very slow way. And it reminded me of the boiling frog. Are you familiar with? Yeah, you're familiar with that parable. And
Hmm.
so I posted on LinkedIn two images which I used ChatGPT to help me create. One was the corporate pressure cooker, where it was all about targets and productivity and efficiency and performance. And then the corporate pond, where it was more about playfulness and experimentation and all of the rest. And the frogs in the pond, not only were they happier, but they could jump further and they were going to live longer rather than in the pressure cooker where they boil eventually, which is, yeah. So, all right, we're agreed on this, and I guess it'll be interesting for people listening to this to just think about that. It's easy to defend. Well, we've got to do a good job, and that's the reason that we can't allow standards to slip. And believe me, I'm a great advocate of high standards. So, having worked in five-star hotels, you must be at your best every single day. But I also learned that you just need to allow people to be human to get the best performance. Um, so what about we'll now just uh, bring to mind some examples of enjoyment. So when is a time where that you can remember that you're happy to share that you enjoyed yourself, either on your own or with other people?
Well, I mentioned before, because I've been traveling for the last 3 years, a little bit more kind of nomadic, and I sort of lived in Melbourne most of the time, but while traveling to Sydney, I blocked the whole week, or normally plan to, even though it's a journey that you can do in a day, or I blocked the whole week. So the enjoyment to discover new routes and places, and as well as that example of being in touch with nature and feeling the breeze, the fresh air. That is one of the most specific examples. I also enjoy cooking. And so for me, when I have people over for dinner, it is something that I share very, very much and I enjoy very, very much. And because it's that cultural experience. And so then that will have a kind of a story for the food, whether I found it in a thin book. And then to me, it's just with the flavors, and I will talk talked about it, that oh, it has some Indian curry or some dal, or if it's South American, what's so great about it because it reminds me my culture of origin. I also have a dog, and the dog has proven in the last 4 years to have brought enormous enjoyment in my life. And so to see his playfulness, and I would say the ability to be in the now, in the moment of now, and the spontaneity to greet people without any judgment, with no biases. And we went to a place called Newcastle in the north of Sydney. And I had some friends in an employment services office and the Salvation Army. And so they allowed me to work from there, but I'm not related to them. And so my dog was there greeting and meet and greet people that were there for, their appointments and where they have to look for work.
Yeah,
Otherwise, the service are not going to pay them the benefits.
benefits. Yeah,
And sometimes I was a bit scared, thinking that, wow, these are people that maybe haven't taken a shower for days, and some people that are smoking so heavily that you could smell it in the skin, and he was just there licking them like crazy. And I just felt like I think we could all learn so much from this dog. And
yeah,
that
it's a good.
great enjoyment. I don't feel a gap. I don't feel a void because it's just like seeing his vibrancy is full of enjoyment in my life.
Yeah, I mean that last example. I think it's actually an Australian author who has written a book called "Be More Dog," and it's just taking lessons about the way that dogs behave and applying it to us. Um,
Mm,
I'll look it up and send you the link in case you're interested to check it
yeah.
out. And the other things that you mentioned, so greeting people without judgment. I was on a business trip in Florida last week, and I was introduced to a lot of people that obviously I didn't know. But the person, Francesca Donlan, that was introducing me, knew many of them. And so it was quite a strange situation because she would hug the person that she knew, and they might be with other people that she didn't know. And so then there was a choice for us. You know, we could either do the more formal greeting because we didn't know each other, but I chose to hug. And I just said, I'm doing hugs. And everybody was fine with it, actually. You know, nobody was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I'll never know because that you don't know what would have happened if it had gone the other way. But all of the conversations we had were extremely positive. Now, I don't know to what extent it was dependent on that as the beginning, but I don't think that it hurt. So that's one. And from the same trip, you mentioned food. We were fortunate enough to be invited to an evening event by a confectioner called Norman Love. who in Fort Myers, so he makes chocolates and beautiful desserts. And he was previously the pastry chef or patissier with Ritz-Carlton in Naples in Florida. So his standards are just the best. And he had produced this food that was amazing to look at. You know, you could tell that there had been so much attention to detail, so much skill, and so much love that had been put into it. It was amazing. And at my level, and you mentioned spontaneity in enjoyment. One of the things that I don't quite know why I enjoy it so much, but it's when you open the fridge and there are maybe a few things there and they need to be used up. And so you have to be creative in creating a recipe from the things that are there rather than looking it up in a book, listing the ingredients, going to buy them, and then making it. You know, it's something less interesting
Mhm.
about that than just looking to see what you've got and say, oh, I know what we'll do with this, and just having a go. So thank you for kind of raising those things in response to what you said. Now, in Values Jam, there's also an opportunity for you to ask a question. So we're going to do that now. So, and the way that it works is that you ask the question, and if you've got the answer already and you want to share the answer first, please do. Or if you want to ask the question to me and I go first and then you respond, that's fine too. And so ask your own question about enjoyment, beginning with who, what, when, where, why, or how.
And so, even though it might be a cliche, and so I wanted to say why, but I will go with who. So, who did you become when you embrace fully enjoyment?
A child.
Wonderful.
And yeah, so whether that's jumping in a puddle, or whether it's playing a trick on somebody or surprising somebody, um, yeah, or doing something that is not regarded as being what grown-ups do. And that's why I'll give you an example. So I mentioned the grandchildren earlier. When I
Mhm.
went to see them recently, they were drawing at first, and then after a while, I just said, "Hey guys, do you want to play a game?" And they stopped their drawing and they said, "What game?" So I said, "Well, I was thinking that we could all pretend to be baby dinosaurs inside our eggs, and we need to get out because it's time for us to be born." And so we all crouched on the floor, and I knocked on the floor, and I said, "That's me and knocking the shell to make a hole. Can anybody help me?" And they did all this thing, and then Jacob, the older one, he's 6. He said, "Right now, I'm getting older. Now I'm going to be a daddy dinosaur." And it turned into this quite long game. So to answer your question, I become a child. What about you?
Oh, yes, I embrace life to the fullest. I become that like my dog then if I just being in the now and doesn't I don't care who is looking and how I will be judged. So maybe I become more like a dog or and also like a child with with
Yeah.
with no preconception, but also fear of the judgment that we're going to get as you're a grown up, middle age, or over the hill woman,
So
whatever
it's
you
a
get.
bit like an echo of before when you talked about dancing, right? It's the
Hmm.
same thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Very much. in the moment, spontaneous, and yeah.
I guess that so I've just been thinking about why more people don't do this, and I guess it's because in certain situations there are consequences, or potentially there are consequences. So in that example that I gave you, I was
Mhm.
safe to do that, right? Nobody would think worse of me for it because nobody was there apart from us. But then in other situations, whether it's a prank or that jumping in a puddle, people, I suppose, there is something about, oh, what will they think of me? Um, what will they say about me? And this sort of thing. So do you think that's why people are not more inclined to be like a child or a dog?
Yes, I think that would be one of the reasons. And the other one is that there needs to be a clear distinction of the environment. And so when we looked at logical levels, and you mentioned the where and the what and the how and the who and the why, and so your why can influence your where. And so when you have that clarity on why you do things, the things you do, then you could be in any type of environment. However, people get too analytical or get caught in these logical levels, and then the environment dictates everything else, right? And so the way they do things,
Yeah.
how they do it, who they become, because the corporate environment, and you saw it in, or you mentioned it in your example of this large uh, organization in banking and trading. And so the environment is that this is a trading floor. We are serious. We are here. Playing or risking people's money. And
Mhm.
so the environment was dictating every other layer, even their why they do it. And so I think that is why, or one of the reasons in my experience, why people don't do it. And also, well, I don't, you know, some cultures can be a bit more um, spontaneous or extrovert, even flirty. However, so I don't bring my flirty self to a job interview. And so it reminds me of this psychologist that talk um, how and Cedra Stone and how passed away a few years ago. So Cedra, his wife, continues the work, and they have something called the psychology of the self. And
Right.
so and they talk about this. So it's when is it appropriate to bring the flirty self? And so you felt safe by playing dinosaurs that were about to be born in, but you don't do that in the you didn't do that in a meeting in Florida. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it very much. All the details you gave me about the chocolatier and the patisserie and all the mastery that they do, you described it in such a level of precision. And you certainly, even if they offer you one, you would have an expression of delight,
Mm.
right? But so the environment dictates sometimes the order of why we get caught. And this is what, for example, we have 5 generations working now together in the
Yeah.
same working environment. And so some people are finding it very difficult because the millennials and the ones after millennials, they don't follow the orders or the it's not only orders, but the priorities that other say Gen Ys, baby boomers that are almost all of them retiring, and Gen Y is replacing the responsibility of baby boomers. And so they're just finding that they're not responding in the same manner that the expectations that these older generations have.
Yeah.
And so we have, yeah, so it's a complex sociological then structure and topics here that we are uncovering, Alan.
It certainly is. And I use a phrase which is very simple, maybe too simple, but I think it's true that we are a function of our environment. And when we put too much attention to the environment, then we're surprised that enjoyment is suppressed. We shouldn't be because we put the systems in place ourselves. Um, and it's a choice to break from that. With the ice creams on the trading floor, it takes courage to challenge it. But I think this is a good moment because what you've identified is how complex this relationship is between behavior and the system. And rather than open up that conversation, we just don't have time. So I think this is a good time to bring our values jam to a close. There is always one final question. So I'm going to ask you that now. And it is, what are you encouraged to do differently about enjoyment as a result of this conversation?
I will encourage people to think or feel and see things through the world, a dog, a puppy dog, if you have the opportunity, or a child, if you have little children in your family. So how would they approach these?
Hmm.
How would they, not necessarily, I don't need to talk like a child, but
Yeah,
how would they approach the task? How would they interact with others? How would they express their feelings? How would they um, tell others that this matters? And think about if this was the last shot you got on this earth, even though that might be a cliche. So what is it? What is something that you want to leave behind that is of smile or laughter or something that is incredibly enjoyable?
brilliant. And actually, I'm with you. So today, I'm committing to having a look through children's eyes at what I'm doing and just to see whether that makes even the smallest change with the calls that I have today and the work that I have today. And just to support what you've said about that being a very different perspective, I want to finish with sharing a story. Again, it's Jacob, my grandson. We were on the beach and we had been playing frisbee early in the morning and it was misty. And then he got a bit tired because we've been running around a lot. And then the mist lifted and the sun was quite strong but low in the sky. So while we were walking, the shadows in front of us were really long because the sun was behind us. And I said, Jacob, I've got an idea for a game. Do you want to play? And he said, what's the game? So I said, well, you see our shadows in front of us. And he's like, yeah. So I said, well, what about if they have a conversation and you do the voice for my shadow and I do the voice for your shadow? So he said, okay, let's do that. And I said, who's going to go first? And he said, can you go first? So I said, of course. And I said, he calls me Grandad Alan. So I said, Grandad Alan's shadow, what do you think of this beach? And he said, I think it's very sandy. He put on the deepest voice that I've never heard him use before. And the reason I mention this is because it shocked me actually. It made me realize something that I had never considered before. Yet that's how he thinks I speak. And yet for me, it's like nothing, I'd never considered something like that before. So I think it's relevant to what we were saying earlier because a child's perspective, as that example shows, can be completely different than our expectation.
It has no filters, different filters. So they don't have the, all the layers that how we see the world, particularly, from 0 to 7. When you talk to a child that is 7, 8, 9, oh my God, it's so much fun.
Well, Maria, I've thoroughly enjoyed this
Oh,
conversation, so thank you so much.
oh my goodness, I have enjoyed as well. I didn't know what to expect, and I have enjoyed so much. And I hope that your listeners find it also very enlightening and uh, something to think about and reflect.
Thank you, Maria. You enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you, Alan.
Bye.
We'll see